Switching over to the NFL, Brock Purdy got his payday about a week ago.
$53 million a year.
Yes, he did.
A lot of notes on this one. Like, just about half of the deal is guaranteed, which is kind of low for a franchise guy. I kind of like to see that for somebody who, I mean, he's played all of like 2.5 years, and he's been good for 1.5 of those years. By no means was he meant to be a day one starter, but he pretty much ended up being that, and he's been electric, but it's been with one of the best units in football. Another note to this deal is it's a 5-year deal. Like, the standard for franchise quarterbacks, for whatever reason, has become 4 years. I'm not a big proponent of that. I think if you have your guy, you want to commit to him long term, it's going to save you money in the long run. It's going to be great for your culture. You know, you're 1 year further away from another holdout or a trade request. And we've seen it with guys like Josh Allen. Like, he got a 6-year deal and then another 5-year deal, and he hasn't even played out his 6-year deal yet.
Yeah.
Pat Mahomes got 10. Dak Prescott gets 4. Tua gets 4. Trevor Lawrence gets 4. These guys are top-paid quarterbacks in the league. Why are we not committing to them if we're so sure that they're worth all this money?
Well, that's the thing. Maybe these teams aren't so sure that they're Mahomes and Josh Allen level. They clearly haven't had the playoff success as those two guys. And even Lamar. Like, Lamar hasn't gotten that level of payday that Josh and Patrick have gotten. So if you're a team with a borderline top 10 guy, whether it is Tua, Dak, or Trevor, giving them top dollar, but maybe not tying yourself to that guy for, you know, more than a half dozen years isn't the worst thing in the world. But with Purdy specifically, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I love that they didn't guarantee too much of his deal. I know you haven't been the biggest Brock Purdy supporter, given his lack of production specifically last year, but I think it was the right move to pay him. Absolutely. I think given that you sold a bunch of the team this offseason, you cleared up a bunch of cap room to keep him on the roster as well as some of the other key guys. I think it was the right move. You know, this 49ers front office has been solid in the draft. I think that they've nailed a lot of the key guys, whether it be Fred Warner, George Kittle, and others. If they're able to, you know, maintain some continuity there and continue to hit a couple guys every draft, they'll still be in playoff contender discussions for years to come. So
yeah, for sure, I would agree. And to speak to this Brock Purdy deal again, yeah, I'm not against the deal itself. Like, I think when you have QB1 in the building, you pay him. Even for like a team like the Packers, Jordan Love did not prove very much in his first 9-8 rookie year. He won a playoff game, so his playoff record is now 50% after that year. His stats were pretty mediocre, like maybe cusp of top 10 for that last half of the year, but over the year as a whole, top 15, top 16, and he holds out, and he wants a deal. Brock Purdy wasn't holding out. Like, he's a good culture guy, and I understand why you want that guy in the locker room long term, and his play has been very far above average for the entirety of his career. But $53 million is a lot of money. That's like top 8 quarterback money in the league. And the way that the QB market works, you know, you pay your guy maybe 3 or 4 spots ahead of what he's actually worth, because he knows that in a couple of years the market's going to blow up again and 53 is not going to be worth anything. I don't know if it puts the Niners in a position to win in the next 2 or 3 years. Obviously, their window did close. They sold very heavily. But that's also an opportunity to say, hey, like, Brock, you played the last year of your deal. We'll find QB1 next year. And we'll trade you away for whatever value. Or I think there were other options that could have opened up their window sooner, because Brock Purdy is a system quarterback at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's valid. So my question to you, in reference to what you just said, is like, how good are the 49ers next year? Where do you have them finishing in the grand scheme of the NFC and their division? What's their record?
With a very aged offensive line, Brandon Ayuk, who knows what he's going to be next year. If he recovers from this injury and he's back to 100%, if he shows up to training camp. Last year he was terrible before he got hurt, and I attribute a lot of that to the fact that he held out. You know, it's the same way CD didn't find his rhythm for a few weeks, but Ayuk is a lot younger and has only maybe had 1 or 2 really wow seasons. If he's Purdy's favorite guy, that's great, but like, Now you lose Jawan Jennings, who was a go-to guy last year. You lose Deebo Samuel, who's been a huge part of the Shanahan offense. So it's Brandon Ayuk and Ricky Pearsall, who hasn't proved anything. Maybe the most disappointing first-round receiver from last year's class.
Sure.
And you wonder, what does this offense really have? Like, if CMC's back, that's great. But I think that workload from 2023 might have kind of ended his career.
Absolutely.
You trade out his tough Jordan Mason. What do they have? What did they pick up offensively in this draft? Defensively, they replenished in a lot of areas, and I think they'll be, maybe comparable to last year's Rams defense. Like, you've got one or two core guys and a lot of youth and a lot to build around. That's great. Offensively, for Shanahan to be this offensive mastermind, I just don't really see it. I think you've got X receiver. I think you've got QB1. I don't trust the backfield. I don't trust the offensive line. I trust the tight end. That's about it.
So if this is maybe an average or slightly below average offense and a top 12 defense in football, I mean, you got to imagine with bringing Bob Saleh back in the building, they'll be pretty competent on that front. I've seen Colin Cowherd flirt with 13 wins. I wouldn't go that far. He's a big Purdy guy, but what's the win total that you would kind of flirt with here?
Think about this division for a second, because 6 out of your 17, you've got to be in-house. You've got to be the Arizona Cardinals.
That's 2.
You think that's 2 wins?
Unfortunately, I do.
Solid draft for Arizona, but they've never given Kyler the pieces that he needs, and who knows if Harrison's going to take a step? Who knows if there's going to be weapons? Is James Conner really worth the money that he's getting now? Trey McBride, he didn't find the end zone last year till like week 18.
Yeah.
So that's fair. We'll give 2. The Seahawks, maybe 1-1.
Okay.
Seahawks had a lot of trouble putting him away last year. I trust Sam Darnold more than Geno Smith. I trust Jalen Milroe if he takes over at any point this year. I like Gray Zabel on the interior O-line.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Seahawks crushed the draft personally as a whole. But still, I mean, there's a lot of narratives. And even for Mike McDonald, who is a new culture guy for Seattle, I don't necessarily know that he can squash those San Francisco narratives. And then the Rams, who we're both really high on, who I think probably go 2-0. And I think they went 2-0 on them last year when this Rams roster was weaker.
Right. So, for the sake of conversation here, I just put up their schedule, and let's just run through it real quick and see where we end up. Week 1 at Seattle.
We'll say in Seattle is a loss.
Okay. At New Orleans.
That's a win.
Home for Arizona.
It's a win.
Home for Jacksonville.
It's a win.
At LA.
It's a loss.
At Tampa.
That's a loss to me.
Home for Atlanta.
I don't know what Michael Penix is yet, but we'll say it's a win.
Okay. Home for Houston. Excuse me, away at Houston.
Away at Houston, I'm going to say that's a loss.
At New York, Giants.
It's a win.
Home for the Rams.
I'm saying they go 0-2 against the Rams. Do you disagree?
Historically, Kyle has McVay's number, I believe, in their series by a pretty decent margin, so I think they split. But that's just me.
I'll give you that.
At Arizona.
It's a win.
Home for Carolina.
It's a win.
At Cleveland.
That's a win.
See Shador on that game. Bye week. Home for Tennessee.
That's a win.
At Indy.
That's a win.
Home for Chicago.
Man, I'm thinking about that Justin Fields Penguin slide game right now. At the St.
It'll be
Justin
December
Fields.
28th. We'll be in San Francisco there, actually.
Man, I think this Bears team is really good. I'm going to say that's a loss.
Okay. And then home for Seattle.
So that's a win if it's at home.
Okay. So how many wins you got?
That's 12. In my head, look, that is an easy schedule to me.
It is.
This still feels like I can't mentally shake the 2023 Niners out of my head and what they did to the Cowboys for like 3 years straight. I think if you forget that and you just look at this roster from top to bottom, I think they maybe go 9-8. You know?
I'm probably somewhere in between. I think you're valid for thinking that. You know, there was a lot of movement this offseason, but average Purdy year, I mean, what is that, like 25-8? Like he'll be serviceable despite the lack of weapons, and I think the defense will be very solid. Some of the games on there, maybe Indy, maybe we'll see how Cleveland looks at that point in the year. I'm very high on Atlanta. Some of those games I think may go the other way. Maybe they're closer to 10 wins than they are 12 or 13, but I don't know. I'd probably stick with maybe 10.
One thing to point out about this Purdy deal is that historically, the Niners move off of quarterbacks that they commit to so quickly. With Joe Montana and Colin Kaepernick and Jimmy Garoppolo.
That's interesting.
And I think that might kind of point to why Purdy's deal is so not guaranteed, right? You could foresee after 2 years it being pretty understandable to move off of him financially. I don't know how the guarantees are spread out cap-wise, but with that in mind, like, are they even banking on winning this year? Are they banking on winning with Purdy at all if they're not guaranteeing him all this money? Or do they kind of understand, like, hey, we want to give you one more year to prove that you are capable of winning games without a super team. And if you can't, then, okay, we're going to move off of you.
That's actually a really good point, because like you said, we don't know how the contract is structured per se, but if it's front loaded and they get a lot of those guarantees out of the way this year, how much money are they going to bite if he only wins 8 games this year?
And there's a good handful of teams that would trade for Brock Purdy, especially if there's still 3 or 4 years left on his deal. He's no longer a top 10 paid quarterback after this year, more than likely.
Sure.
Imagine like Indianapolis, whose only missing piece is the quarterback, and they're loaded at every level of the roster, and they get a plug and play guy for $53 million when the market resets to 70. They're not going to be scratching their heads at that. Like, they're going to go for that. So
that's a great point.
I don't necessarily think that Kyle Shanahan thinks the Niners are going for 13 wins this year. Obviously, every team wants to win the Super Bowl every year, but I think this entire offseason has been pointing to a large-scale rebuild for the Niners. They just happen to have a few players that they wanted to keep around, being Fred Warner, Damador Lenore, George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, and Brock Purdy.
Yeah, they'll be one of the most talked about teams this season for sure, so can't wait to see that.